With $47,000 in medical debt and 3 jobs barely keeping her afloat, Zara Mitchell is counting down the minutes until her next shift ends when a wrong turn through an upscale Seoul hotel leads her into a private meeting with the most dangerous man she will ever encounter. At 24, Zara Mitchell moved through the marble corridors of the Latte Hotel with practiced efficiency, her housekeeping cart loaded with fresh linens and cleaning supplies. She was exhausted in the bone-deep way that came from working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and carrying the weight of her mother's mounting medical bills. Her natural hair was pulled back in a protective style that managed to look both professional and beautiful, dark coils catching the lobby's crystal chandelier light. She had learned to move quickly and quietly, to blend into the background of wealthy spaces where her presence was necessary but not particularly welcome. Her mother's cancer treatment had become a relentless cycle of hope and debt, each round of chemotherapy adding another 10,000 to an already impossible number. The executive floor should have been empty at this hour. Zara checked her phone, confirming she had 15 minutes to finish the VIP suites before her shift at the restaurant across town began. She needed to find the staff break room to grab her jacket, but the hallway seemed different tonight. Doors that usually led to supply closets now opening onto spaces she had never seen. The hotel's renovation had changed everything, and she was still learning the new layout. She pushed open what she thought was the break room door and stepped into a world that made her blood run cold. 5 men in expensive suits sat around a mahogany conference table, their conversation stopping the moment she appeared. Papers were spread across the polished surface, photographs that looked like surveillance images, and in the center of it all sat a man who commanded the room without saying a word. He was Korean, late 30s, with sharp features that seemed carved from stone and dark hair swept back in perfect precision. His suit was black, impeccably tailored, the kind that cost more than Zara made in 6 months. But it was his eyes that held her frozen in the doorway, dark and calculating, missing nothing as they took in her uniform, her cart, her obvious confusion. "I am so sorry," Zara managed, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I was looking for the staff room. Wrong door." She started to back out, but the man at the head of the table raised one hand, a gesture that stopped her as effectively as a wall. "Wait," he said, and his voice was low, controlled, with just a hint of accent that made the single word sound like a command. His English was perfect, each syllable precise. "What is your name?" "Zara Mitchell. I work housekeeping. I really should go. I have another job to get to, and I am already running late." The other men were watching this exchange with expressions that ranged from confused to alarmed. One of them, a younger man with nervous energy, leaned forward. "Boss, should we handle this?" "No," the man at the head said without taking his eyes off Zara. "Miss Mitchell, how long have you worked here?" 6 months, Zara answered automatically, then wondered why she was answering at all. She should run. Every instinct screamed that she had walked into something dangerous, something that had nothing to do with hotel business despite the expensive conference room and the men in perfect suits. But something about the way he looked at her, not dismissive or angry but curious, kept her rooted in place. "And what did you see when you walked in here?" "Men having a meeting," she said honestly. "Nothing that is any of my business." She saw him nod slightly, as if her answer confirmed something he had been thinking. One of the other men shifted in his chair, and she caught a glimpse of something metallic under his jacket that made her stomach drop. These were not businessmen. Not the legal kind, anyway. "You look tired," the man said, and there was something almost gentle in his voice now. "When did you last eat?" The question was so unexpected that Zara blinked. "I had coffee around noon, I think." "That is not eating. Sit." It was not a request, but it was not harsh either. Something about his tone, the way he gestured to a chair at the side of the room, made her feet move before her brain could object. She found herself sitting in a leather chair that probably cost more than her rent, her hands folded in her lap, watching as this dangerous stranger studied her with the intensity of someone solving a puzzle. "Boss," the nervous man tried again. "We were in the middle of discussing the Busan situation." "We were finished with that discussion," the man replied without looking away from Zara. "The Kim family territory is secure. The opposition has been reminded of the consequences of crossing our boundaries. Young, call the kitchen and have them send coffee and food." Zara watched this exchange with growing alarm. Territory. Opposition. Consequences. This was definitely not hotel business. She started to stand. I really should go. My manager will be looking for me if I am not back soon. Your manager, he repeated. Does your manager know you are working 3 jobs? Does your manager know you have not eaten in 8 hours? Does your manager care that you are exhausted? The questions hit too close to home, and Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks. That is not really your concern. Maybe not, he agreed. But I am curious about someone who works 3 jobs and still looks like she is drowning. Medical bills, perhaps. Zara's hands tightened in her lap. How did he know that? Her face must have given her away, because he nodded again, that same satisfied expression. I am Kim Jae-sung, he said, as if his name should mean something to her. And you, Miss Mitchell, are interesting. Before she could ask what that meant, movement caught her attention. One of the men was gathering papers from the table, and something small and dark fell to the floor. A USB drive, sleek and expensive-looking, had rolled under the table toward the window. The man who had dropped it was focused on his conversation with another suit, pointing to what looked like building blueprints. Zara looked at the USB drive, then at Kim Jae-sung, who was watching her with that calculating expression. She could pretend she had not seen it. She could leave right now and forget this entire encounter. Instead, she found herself standing and walking to the table. Excuse me, she said to the man who had dropped it. You lost this. She held out the USB drive, and the room went completely silent. The man stared at the device in her palm like she was offering him a live grenade. Kim Jae-sung was very still, his dark eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The man took the USB drive with shaking fingers. Thank you, he managed. Zara nodded and turned to go, but Kim Jae-sung's voice stopped her again. Miss Mitchell, he said, sit back down. We are not finished talking. Zara found herself back in the leather chair, acutely aware that every man in the room was watching her with expressions she could not quite read. Kim Jae-sung had dismissed his associates with a subtle gesture, and now they were alone in the expensive conference room that felt more like a trap with each passing second. So, Miss Mitchell, he said, settling back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Tell me what you think you witnessed here tonight. The question was posed gently, but Zara was not fooled. This was a test, and her life probably depended on passing it. She thought about the conversation she had interrupted, the words that had made her blood cold. Territory. Opposition. Consequences. The deference these grown men showed to Kim Jae-sung, the way they called him boss, the metallic gleam under expensive jackets. A business meeting, she said carefully. Men discussing work problems. His dark eyes never left her face. What kind of work problems? The kind that are none of my business, Zara replied, meeting his gaze despite the fear crawling up her spine. I clean rooms and serve food. I do not ask questions about what guests discuss in private. Kim Jae-sung smiled for the first time since she had entered the room, and it transformed his entire face. The sharp, dangerous edges softened into something almost warm. Very good answer. You are either very smart or very naive, and I do not think you are naive. Zara glanced at her phone and felt panic spike through her chest. She was already 10 minutes late. If she missed her evening shift at the restaurant, she could not afford to lose that job. Her mother's next chemotherapy session was scheduled for Friday, and the hospital required payment up front. I really do need to go, she said, standing up. My manager expects me to finish my rounds, and I have another job across town. 3 jobs, he repeated thoughtfully. That explains the exhaustion. What is the third one? She should not answer. She should walk out of this room and never look back. But something about his tone, not mocking or judgmental but genuinely curious, made her pause. Coffee shop in the morning, before my shift here. 6 to 11. So you work 17 hours a day, he calculated. When do you sleep? 4 hours, if I am lucky, Zara admitted, then wondered why she was telling him this. There was something about Kim Jae-sung that invited honesty, even when every survival instinct told her to run. And this is for medical bills, he said. It was not a question. Zara nodded, her throat suddenly tight. My mother has cancer. The treatment is expensive. Kim Jae-sung was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with that same calculating intensity. When he spoke again, his voice was different, thoughtful rather than commanding. I may have a solution to your problem, Miss Mitchell. But first, I need to know something. Do you have medical training? The question surprised her. I am a certified nursing assistant. I was in nursing school before my mother got sick, but I had to drop out to work. Why nursing? He asked. Because I wanted to help people, Zara said simply. Because I thought I could make a difference. He nodded slowly, as if her answer confirmed something important. Miss Mitchell, I have an elderly father who requires specialized care. He has early-stage dementia, and his condition is becoming more challenging to manage. The position would be live-in, with a private apartment on our family estate. The compensation would be substantial. Zara stared at him. Are you offering me a job? I am offering you a way out of working yourself to death, he replied. But I must be honest with you about the complications. My family has business rivals who occasionally make threats against people in our employ. The last caregiver we hired left after receiving some concerning phone calls. Business rivals, she repeated slowly. The pieces were clicking into place, painting a picture that made her stomach clench. You are not talking about hotel business, are you? Kim Jae-sung regarded her steadily. No, I am not. Does that frighten you? It should, Zara said honestly. It should terrify me. But I am already terrified. Terrified of losing my mother, terrified of drowning in debt, terrified that no matter how hard I work, it will never be enough. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, expensive cardstock with minimal text. Just his name, a phone number, and an address. Take some time to think about it, he said, placing the card on the table between them. The position would pay $150,000 annually, plus all medical expenses covered for your mother. Complete medical care, the best doctors, private rooms, experimental treatments if necessary. Zara picked up the card with trembling fingers. $150,000 was more money than she had ever imagined having. Her mother could get the treatment she needed without the constant worry about costs. But this man was dangerous, his world was dangerous, and she would be walking into something she did not understand. Why me? She asked. You do not know anything about me except that I am tired and broke. Kim Jae-sung stood and moved to the window, looking out at the Seoul skyline with his hands clasped behind his back. Because when you found something valuable that did not belong to you, your first instinct was to return it. Because you are exhausted but still treat strangers with politeness. Because you chose to care for your mother instead of protecting yourself. He turned back to her. These are rare qualities, Miss Mitchell. In my experience, people who possess them can be trusted with family. The word family hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning she was only beginning to grasp. This was not just a job offer. This was an invitation into something much larger and more complicated. I need time to think, she said. Of course. Take as long as you need. But do not take too long. My father needs care, and your mother needs treatment. Kim Jae-sung walked to the door and opened it for her, a gesture so unexpected and courteous that it threw her off balance. He escorted her to the elevator personally, his presence commanding even in the hallway. Other hotel staff, they passed, bowed slightly, and hurried out of their way. As the elevator doors opened, he spoke again. Miss Mitchell, whatever you decide, be careful walking to your car tonight. And perhaps consider taking a taxi to your next job instead of the subway. The doors closed before she could ask what he meant, leaving her alone with her reflection and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 3 days passed before Zara understood what Kim Jae-sung had meant about being careful. 3 days of trying to forget the expensive conference room, the dangerous men, and the business card that sat on her kitchen table like an unexploded bomb. She had almost convinced herself it was all some strange dream until she noticed the man in the gray jacket. He appeared first outside the hotel, leaning against a black sedan while she finished her housekeeping shift. Then again at the coffee shop where she worked mornings, ordering nothing but watching her from a corner table. By the third day, when she spotted the same face near the restaurant where she waited tables, the cold reality settled into her bones. She was being followed. Zara tried to tell herself it was paranoia, exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But when she left the restaurant at 11:30 that night, walking through the parking garage to catch the last subway train, she knew with absolute certainty that she was in danger. Footsteps echoed behind her, too many of them, moving with purpose rather than coincidence. She quickened her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs as she reached for her phone. The parking garage was nearly empty, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows between concrete pillars. Her car was parked 3 levels up, too far to reach safely. The subway entrance was ahead, but she would have to cross an open expanse of asphalt to reach it. The footsteps were getting closer. Zara broke into a run, her work shoes slipping on the smooth concrete as she headed for the subway stairs. She could hear them behind her now, no longer trying to be subtle. 3 sets of footsteps, heavy and determined. She reached the stairwell and started down, taking the steps 2 at a time. A hand grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. 3 men surrounded her on the concrete landing, their faces hard and unfamiliar. They were not Korean, she realized with distant clarity. They looked like foreigners, possibly Chinese or Japanese, dressed in expensive suits, but with the kind of build that suggested violence was their primary profession. "Where were you 3 nights ago?" the largest one demanded in accented English. "What meeting did you interrupt at the Latte Hotel?" Zara pressed her back against the concrete wall, her mind racing. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Wrong answer," another man said, stepping closer. "We know you were in Kim Jae-sung's private conference. We know you saw documents, heard conversations. What did he tell you?" "Nothing," Zara said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I was lost. I walked into the wrong room and left immediately." The first man smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression she had ever seen. "You are lying. Kim Jae-sung does not let witnesses walk away from his meetings. Unless you are working for him now." "I clean hotel rooms," Zara said desperately. "I work 3 jobs. I am nobody important." "That is about to change," the man said. "You are going to call Kim Jae-sung and tell him you want to meet. You are going to wear a wire, and you are going to record everything he says. Or your mother is going to have a very unfortunate accident during her next chemotherapy session." The mention of her mother hit Zara like a physical blow. These men knew where her mother was. They knew about the cancer, the treatments, the hospital schedule. Her legs nearly gave out from the wave of terror that crashed over her. "My mother has nothing to do with this," she managed. "She has everything to do with this," the man replied. "Because you are going to do exactly what we tell you, or she is going to die. And it will not be quick." Zara was going to be sick. Her mother, lying helpless in a hospital bed, was now a target because Zara had walked into the wrong room. Because she had been exhausted and confused and made one terrible mistake. The sound of an engine echoed through the parking garage, followed by car doors slamming. Heavy footsteps, moving with military precision. The 3 men spun toward the sound, hands reaching inside their jackets. Kim Jae-sung appeared at the bottom of the stairwell with 4 of his associates, all of them moving with the controlled grace of predators. He was dressed in the same expensive dark suit, but now Zara could see what she had missed before. The way he held himself, the way his men positioned themselves around him, the cold calculation in his dark eyes as he assessed the situation. "Gentlemen," he said, and his voice carried easily in the concrete space. "You appear to be lost." The largest man straightened, trying to project confidence. "This is not your business, Kim. The girl is coming with us." Kim Jae-sung smiled, and it was nothing like the warm expression Zara had seen in the hotel. This was the smile of a shark before it struck. "Miss Mitchell is under my protection." Touching her was a mistake. Threatening her family was a much larger mistake. What happened next was efficient and terrifying. Kim Jae-sung never moved from where he stood, but his men flowed forward like water, and within seconds the 3 strangers were on their knees with guns pressed to their heads. No shots fired, no shouting, just controlled and absolute dominance. "Take them to the warehouse," Kim Jae-sung said calmly. "Make sure they understand that threatening my people has consequences. Make sure their employers understand as well." The men were hauled away without another word, disappearing into the parking garage as quickly as they had appeared. Zara found herself alone with Kim Jae-sung, shaking so hard she could barely stand. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and his voice was gentle again, the dangerous edge completely gone. "No," she whispered. "But they know about my mother. They know where she is." "Not anymore," he said firmly. "She is being moved to a private medical facility as we speak. Complete security, the best doctors in Seoul, everything she needs. She will be safe." Zara stared at him. "You already moved her. I told you to be careful, Miss Mitchell. When people do not listen to my advice, I take steps to protect them anyway." He gestured toward a black car that had appeared at the garage entrance. "Come. We have things to discuss, and this is not the place for such conversations." Zara looked at the car, then back at Kim Jae-sung. Getting in that car would change everything. It would mean crossing a line she could never uncross, entering a world where violence was handled with casual efficiency and people disappeared in parking garages. But those men had threatened her mother. They would come back, and next time Kim Jae-sung might not arrive in time. She got in the car. The ride to his family estate was silent, giving Zara time to process what had just happened and what it meant for her future. The compound was located in one of Seoul's most exclusive districts, hidden behind high walls and electronic gates that spoke of serious security concerns. The main house was a masterpiece of traditional Korean architecture blended with modern luxury, surrounded by gardens that managed to feel both peaceful and completely private. Kim Jae-sung led her to a study lined with books and expensive art, gesturing for her to sit in a leather chair that probably cost more than her yearly rent. He poured 2 glasses of something amber-colored and handed one to her. "Now," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "let us discuss your employment." The terms were more generous than anything Zara could have imagined. $150,000 annually, deposited directly into an account he would establish for her. All medical expenses for her mother covered indefinitely, including experimental treatments not covered by insurance. A private apartment on the estate grounds, fully furnished and maintained. Complete security for both her and her mother, with professional protection details assigned to both. In exchange, she would serve as live-in caregiver for his father, who was 78 years old and suffering from early-stage dementia. She would provide medical assistance to family members when needed, maintain absolute discretion about family business, and accept that her safety now depended on her loyalty to the Kim family. The consequences for betrayal were stated clearly and without emotion. Anyone who violated the family's trust simply disappeared. Their families were left alone, but they themselves were never seen again. Zara listened to all of this while her mind reeled with the impossibility of her situation. 6 hours ago, she had been a struggling hotel housekeeper. Now she was being offered enough money to save her mother's life and secure both their futures. The price was stepping into a world where people settled disputes with violence and loyalty was enforced through fear. She thought about her mother, lying in a hospital bed, trusting that her daughter would find a way to pay for the treatments that might save her life. She thought about the 3 men in the parking garage, their threats, the cold certainty that they would follow through on their promises. She thought about working 17-hour days for the rest of her life and still never earning enough to make a real difference. "I need guarantees," she said finally, "about my mother's safety and medical care." "You have them," Kim Jae-sung replied. "She will receive the best care available, and no one will ever threaten her again. And if I want to leave?" "You will not want to leave," he said with quiet confidence. "But if you ever do, you will be permitted to go. Your mother's medical care will continue for life regardless. I am not in the business of punishing people for wanting freedom, Miss Mitchell. I am in the business of protecting people who choose to trust me." Zara looked into his dark eyes and saw something she had not expected. Honesty. This dangerous man was telling her the truth about what he was offering and what it would cost. The choice was hers, but they both knew she did not really have a choice at all. "I accept," she said. Kim Jae-sung smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Welcome to the family, Miss Mitchell." 6 weeks into her new life, Zara discovered that caring for Kim Jae-sung's father was both easier and harder than she had expected. Mr. Kim was a gentleman in the truest sense, polite and gracious on his good days, confused but never violent on the difficult ones. He had built his fortune in legitimate shipping and real estate, and when his mind was clear, he spoke with pride about the honest empire he had created for his family. On the bad days, he forgot where he was, calling for his late wife and asking when his son would return from university. He did not remember that his dutiful heir had long since graduated into something far darker than business school had prepared him for. Zara's apartment was a marvel of thoughtful design, spacious and beautifully furnished, while maintaining easy access to the main house where Mr. Kim lived. She had her own kitchen, living room, and bedroom, but most of her time was spent in the family wing, helping the elderly man with his medications, his physical therapy, and the gentle routines that kept his declining mind anchored to the present. The compound felt like a small, well-protected city. Gardens designed for peace and privacy, security personnel who moved like shadows, staff members who treated her with respect tinged with curiosity. She was clearly important to Kim Jae-sung, but no one seemed quite sure what to make of the young black woman who had appeared in their carefully ordered world. Her mother's transfer to the private medical facility had been seamless and miraculous. The cancer center was a temple to modern medicine, staffed by specialists who spoke multiple languages and treated patients like royalty rather than burdens. When Zara visited twice a week, she found her mother stronger and more hopeful than she had been in months. The experimental treatment was working, the doctors said. Her prognosis had improved dramatically. It was during dinner on a rainy Thursday evening that Zara first saw Kim Jae-sung as something other than a dangerous benefactor. Mr. Kim was having a particularly difficult day, confused about why his son looked so much older than he remembered, asking repeatedly when they would visit his wife's grave. Instead of showing impatience, Jae-sung sat beside his father and answered each question with infinite gentleness. "She is resting now, father," he said when the old man asked where his wife had gone. "She is waiting for us, but not yet. We still have work to do here." "What kind of work?" Mr. Kim asked, and his voice held the curiosity of a child. "Taking care of family," Jae-sung replied. "Making sure everyone is safe and fed and loved. Important work." Zara watched this exchange from the kitchen doorway, something tight loosening in her chest as she observed the tenderness in Jae-sung's voice, the way he held his father's frail hand without any trace of embarrassment or frustration. This was not the man who had eliminated 3 threats in a parking garage with casual efficiency. This was a son caring for a parent with profound devotion. After dinner, when Mr. Kim was settled for the night, Jae-sung often lingered in the family room while Zara cleaned up and prepared medications for the next day. Their conversations started casually, questions about his father's condition and needs, but gradually evolved into something more personal. "How is your mother responding to the new treatment?" he asked one evening while Zara organized pill containers. "Better than we hoped," she replied. "The doctors think the tumors are shrinking. She has more energy, less pain. She asked me to thank you for the private room with the garden view." "She does not need to thank me," Jae-sung said, "but I am glad she is comfortable." Zara looked at him across the kitchen island, noting the way his expensive suit jacket hung over the back of his chair, the way he had rolled up his sleeves to help with his father's physical therapy earlier. "Why did you really offer me this position?" she asked. "You could have hired a professional nurse with more experience." "Professional nurses ask questions," he replied. "Professional nurses have loyalties to hospitals and medical boards and regulatory agencies. Professional nurses do not understand that sometimes helping family requires accepting moral complexity. And you think I understand that. I think you love your mother enough to work yourself to death for her. I think you walked into a room full of dangerous men and your first instinct was to be helpful rather than destructive. I think you see people as individuals rather than categories." Zara studied his face, looking for deception or manipulation. Instead, she found something that looked remarkably like loneliness. "When did you last have a conversation with someone who was not afraid of you?" she asked. The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a long moment, rolling his whiskey glass between his palms. "A long time," he said finally. "That must be exhausting." "Everything is exhausting," he replied with a slight smile. "But some burdens are worth carrying." It became a ritual, these evening conversations after his father was settled. Zara found herself looking forward to them, to the way Jae-sung relaxed when it was just the two of them, the way he listened when she shared stories about growing up in Detroit, about her mother's strength during the early days of her illness. In return, he told her about his father's business empire, the legitimate ventures that had made the Kim family wealthy and respected long before violence entered their world. The vulnerability exchange happened on a night when the autumn rain drummed against the windows and missed her. Kim had been particularly confused, asking for his wife and becoming agitated when she did not appear. Jae-sung had finally managed to calm his father by showing him old photographs and telling stories about their early years together, but the effort had left him drained. "He was a good man," Jae-sung said quietly as they sat in the dimly lit family room. "My father built everything honestly. Shipping contracts, real estate investments, partnerships based on trust and mutual benefit. He employed hundreds of people, contributed to charities, supported education initiatives. When I was young, I was proud to be his heir." "What changed?" Zara asked gently. "Rivals appeared who did not respect honest business," he replied. Families who had built their wealth through violence and intimidation decided that our territory would be easier to claim than to compete for fairly. They started by targeting our shipping routes, then our employees, then our properties. When they kidnapped and murdered my cousin, my father wanted to go to the police. He still believed the system would protect honest people. But it did not. Jae-sung shook his head, staring into his whiskey glass. The police were already bought. The courts were compromised. Every legitimate avenue led nowhere, while our family business was being destroyed piece by piece. My father was having his first memory problems then, stress and grief making his condition worse. Someone had to make the hard choices. So you made them. I learned their language, he said simply. I hired the kind of people who speak that language fluently. I protected what my father built by becoming what our enemies were. The shipping company is legitimate again. The real estate portfolio is secure. Our employees are safe. But the methods I used to ensure that safety changed me into something my father would not recognize if his mind was clear. Zara reached across the space between their chairs and touched his hand. He does recognize you, she said softly. I see how he looks at you. He sees love, protection, devotion. He sees his son taking care of him. The rest is just details his mind cannot hold on to. Jae-sung looked down at her hand covering his, and she saw his careful control waver for the first time since she had known him. Sometimes I wonder if forgetting is a mercy, he said. If remembering everything would be too much for him to bear. Maybe, Zara replied. But forgetting does not change who you really are underneath all the necessary darkness. I see how gentle you are with him, how patient. I see how you make sure every staff member here has health insurance and housing and education for their children. You protected your family the only way you could, and you are still protecting them. She felt his hand turn under hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. In that moment, the dangerous crime boss disappeared entirely, leaving only a man who had sacrificed his own peace to ensure his family's survival. Zara understood with sudden clarity that they were both carrying impossible burdens for the people they loved, both making choices that required them to be stronger than they had ever wanted to be. Thank you, he said quietly, for seeing me as more than the worst thing I have had to do. Thank you for giving my mother a chance to live, she replied. For giving both of us a chance to stop drowning. They sat in comfortable silence as the rain continued outside, their hands still linked, both of them recognizing that something fundamental had shifted between them. This was no longer just an employment arrangement or a business transaction. This was two people who had found understanding in an unlikely place, comfort in shared burdens, and the beginning of something that felt remarkably like home. The warning signs started 3 days before the attack. Increased security patrols around the compound, guards checking and rechecking communication systems, Jae-sung taking calls at odd hours, and speaking in rapid Korean with an edge to his voice that made Zara's skin prickle. She noticed how the staff moved differently, more efficiently, with the kind of tension that suggested everyone was waiting for something to happen. Jae-sung tried to maintain their normal routines. Dinner with his father, evening conversations in the family room, gentle assistance with Mr. Kim's physical therapy. But Zara could see the strain around his eyes, the way his hand never strayed far from the phone clipped to his belt, the increased number of men in expensive suits who appeared and disappeared from the main house throughout the day. When she asked if something was wrong, he deflected with practiced ease. Just business complications, he said. Nothing that concerns you or my father. But on Wednesday evening, when she was helping Mr. Kim with his medications, she overheard a conversation in the hallway that chilled her blood. Multiple surveillance points compromised, someone was saying in accented English. They have been mapping our security protocols for weeks. This is not random. Jae-sung's response was too quiet to hear, but the tone was unmistakable. Cold. Deadly. Final. Thursday passed in false normalcy. Mr. Kim had one of his better days, remembering stories from his youth and asking intelligent questions about his medications. Jae-sung joined them for lunch and seemed more relaxed, laughing at his father's gentle jokes and helping with afternoon exercises in the garden. For a few hours, it felt like a normal family dealing with the challenges of aging rather than a crime boss protecting his vulnerable parent. That evening, Zara followed her usual routine. Dinner preparation, medication distribution, helping Mr. Kim into his pajamas, and settling him into bed with a book of old photographs. The elderly man was peaceful, his dementia quiet for once, and he squeezed her hand before closing his eyes. "Sleep well," she murmured, adjusting his blankets. "I will be right next door if you need anything." "You are a good daughter," he said drowsily, and the words made her chest tight with affection for this gentle man who had built an empire with honest work and now lived in the fragments of his fading memory. Zara had just finished cleaning the kitchen when the power went out. Not a gradual dimming or the flicker of a storm-induced outage, but an instantaneous plunge into complete darkness that felt deliberate and ominous. Emergency lighting should have engaged immediately, but nothing happened. The compound was blacker than she had ever seen it, the only illumination coming from the distant glow of Seoul's city lights beyond the high walls. Her phone had no signal. Footsteps pounded in the hallway outside, multiple sets moving with military precision. She heard Jae-sung's voice, sharp and commanding in Korean, followed by responses that sounded like status reports. Doors slammed. Engines started in the distance. Zara grabbed a flashlight from the emergency kit and moved toward Mr. Kim's room. The elderly man was sitting up in bed, confused and frightened by the sudden darkness. "Where are the lights?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why is everything black?" "The power went out," Zara said, keeping her voice calm as she sat beside him. "It happens sometimes. Jae-sung will fix it." She did not believe her own words. This was not a random power failure. This was something much worse. The first explosion came from somewhere near the main gates, a distant rumble that shook the windows and made Mr. Kim cry out in alarm. The second was closer, followed by the unmistakable sound of automatic gunfire. Zara's blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. The compound was under attack. Jae-sung appeared in the doorway, moving fast and speaking into a radio. His expensive suit was replaced by tactical clothing, and he carried himself with the deadly grace of someone trained for combat. When he saw Zara and his father, relief flashed across his face. "Are you both unhurt?" he asked. "Yes, but your father is scared," Zara replied. "What is happening?" "Business rivals attempting to solve a problem permanently," he said grimly. "I need to get you both to the safe room. Now." He helped his father out of bed while Zara gathered medications and Mr. Kim's favorite photograph of his late wife. The safe room was hidden behind a bookshelf in Jae-sung's private study, a reinforced space equipped with communications, medical supplies, and enough provisions to last several days. The walls were thick enough to muffle the sounds of gunfire that were getting closer by the minute. "Stay here," Jae-sung told them, his hands gentle on his father's shoulders. "Do not open this door for anyone except me. Do you understand?" Mr. Kim nodded, but his eyes were wide with confusion. "Why are people shooting?" he asked. "What did we do wrong?" "Nothing, father," Jae-sung said softly. "You did nothing wrong. Some people are just angry about business, but I will handle it." He turned to Zara, and she saw something in his dark eyes that looked like fear. Not for himself, but for them. "Keep him calm," he said. "If something happens to me, there is a radio in the corner set to channel 7. Call for assistance and stay here until help arrives." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Zara said firmly. "Go protect your people and come back to us." The attack intensified over the next hour. From their hiding place, they could hear explosions, shouting, the staccato rhythm of gunfire moving through the compound like a deadly storm. Mr. Kim alternated between lucidity and confusion, sometimes understanding they were in danger, sometimes asking why they were hiding in a closet when dinner needed to be prepared. Zara held his hand and told him stories about her childhood in Detroit, about her mother's recovery, about anything that might distract him from the violence raging outside their reinforced walls. She monitored his heart rate, administered anxiety medication when his breathing became labored, and tried not to think about what was happening to Jae-sung and his men. The silence, when it came, was almost more terrifying than the noise had been. For 20 minutes, they heard nothing. No gunfire, no explosions, no shouting. Just an oppressive quiet that made Zara's nerves scream with tension. Mr. Kim had dozed off despite the circumstances, exhausted by fear and confusion, but she remained alert, listening for any sound that might indicate friend or enemy approaching. When the bookshelf moved, revealing Jae-sung in the doorway, Zara nearly collapsed with relief. He was alive, mostly unharmed except for a cut above his left eyebrow and what looked like blood on his shirt that probably was not his own. His dark eyes found hers immediately, checking that she and his father were safe before allowing any emotion to show on his face. "Is it over?" she whispered. "It is over," he confirmed. "The threat has been eliminated permanently." Zara helped him wake his father gently, explaining that the danger had passed and they could return to the comfortable bedroom. Mr. Kim seemed to have forgotten most of what had happened, asking only why his son looked so tired and whether anyone had remembered to lock the front door. After settling his father back into bed with warm tea and reassuring conversation, Jae-sung led Zara to his private study. He poured himself a double whiskey and drank it in one swallow before turning to face her. "They came specifically for you," he said without preamble. "This was not about territory or business disputes. They wanted to eliminate my father's caregiver to force me into a vulnerable position. Someone leaked information about our family structure, about how important you have become to our security." Zara felt the weight of that revelation settle over her like a shroud. People had died tonight because she existed, because caring for Mr. Kim had made her a strategic target. The guilt was overwhelming. "This is my fault," she said. "No," Jae-sung replied sharply. "This is the fault of people who thought they could use an innocent woman and a sick elderly man as weapons against me. They were wrong." He moved closer, and she could see something raw and desperate in his expression. "When I thought they might succeed, when I thought I might lose both of you, I realized something I have been trying to deny for weeks." "What did you realize?" "That you are not just my employee anymore, Zara. You are not just my father's caregiver or a woman I am helping out of obligation. You are mine, completely and absolutely mine. And I will burn down anyone who tries to take you away from me." The possession in his voice should have frightened her. A month ago, it would have sent her running. But standing in his study, surrounded by the aftermath of violence that had been aimed at her specifically, Zara understood that his claim was not about control. It was about protection taken to its ultimate extreme. "I am yours," she said quietly, and felt something settle into place that had been shifting uncertainly for weeks. "And you are mine, broken pieces and all." Jae-sung crossed the remaining distance between them and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses from handling weapons. "Forever," he said. "You are mine forever, and I am yours. Nothing will ever threaten what belongs to me again." When he kissed her, it tasted like commitment and desperation and the metallic edge of violence recently concluded. Zara kissed him back with equal intensity, understanding that they had crossed a line tonight that could never be uncrossed. She was no longer a woman accepting protection from a dangerous man. She was a dangerous man's woman, claimed and claiming in return, willing participant in a world where love was enforced through lethal means. Outside the windows, dawn was breaking over Seoul, illuminating a compound where the last traces of threat were being efficiently eliminated by men who understood that Kim Jae-sung protected what was his with absolute and permanent finality. 6 months after the night that changed everything, Zara stood in the garden where she had first seen Kim Jae-sung show tenderness to his father, watching him practice Tai Chi in the morning sunlight. The compound had been rebuilt stronger than before, security upgraded to levels that made invasion impossible, but the most significant changes were less visible. The man moving through ancient forms with fluid grace was no longer just her employer or protector. He was the person she woke up beside each morning, the one whose dark eyes found hers across crowded rooms, the one who had made her safety and happiness the cornerstone of his empire. Her mother's recovery had exceeded every medical prediction. The experimental treatments, combined with the stress-free environment and world-class care, had eliminated the cancer entirely. Dr. Park spoke in amazed terms about complete remission, about cellular regeneration that bordered on miraculous. When Zara visited the medical center now, it was to celebrate milestones rather than endure setbacks, to plan for a future that stretched ahead bright with possibility. The guest house where her mother now lived was a masterpiece of accessible design, close enough to the main compound for security, but independent enough for dignity. She had her own garden, her own kitchen, her own sitting room where she hosted the other family members for tea and conversation. The transition from hospital patient to beloved family matriarch had been seamless, aided by Mr. Kim Sr.'s immediate affection for the woman who treated him with the same gentle respect his late wife had shown. Mr. Kim's dementia had stabilized under Zara's careful management. The combination of familiar routines, loving care, and reduced stress had slowed the disease's progression significantly. He still had confused days, moments when the present slipped away from him, but he remembered the people he loved and recognized that his son had found happiness. On his clearest days, he spoke with pride about the beautiful woman who had brought peace to their family. It was on one of those clear days that Jae-sung formally asked for his father's blessing. They were sitting in the family room after dinner, Mr. Kim lucid and engaged, asking thoughtful questions about the shipping business and nodding approvingly at reports of legitimate profit margins. Zara was organizing his evening medications when Jae-sung knelt beside his father's chair with the respect due to a patriarch. "Father," he said in Korean, then switched to English so Zara could understand. "I want to marry Zara. I want her to be your daughter officially, not just the woman who cares for you. Will you give us your blessing?" Mr. Kim's eyes brightened with genuine joy. "She is already my daughter," he said, reaching out to take Zara's hand. "But yes, I give my blessing gladly. Your mother would have loved her. They are both strong women who choose to heal rather than harm." Zara felt tears prick her eyes as the elderly man squeezed her fingers. To be accepted so completely by someone whose opinion mattered deeply to Jae-sung felt like a gift beyond measure. When she looked at the man she loved, she saw the same emotional weight reflected in his expression. The proposal itself came 2 weeks later during their evening walk through the gardens. Jae-sung had been quieter than usual, thoughtful in a way that seemed anticipatory rather than troubled. When they reached the spot where Koi moved lazily through illuminated ponds, he stopped and turned to face her. "Zara Mitchell," he said, and his voice carried the same formal precision she had heard in the hotel conference room months ago. "You have saved my father's life, brought peace to our family, and given me something I thought I had lost forever. You have chosen to stay in a dangerous world because you love me, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that choice was worth making." He produced a ring box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a stone that caught moonlight, and threw it back in brilliant facets. The design was elegant and classic, the kind of ring that suggested permanence rather than ostentation. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you be my wife officially, not just in my heart?" "Yes," Zara said without hesitation. "Yes to everything. Yes to being your wife. Yes to this life. Yes to whatever comes next as long as we face it together." The wedding planning revealed aspects of Jae-sung's character that continued to surprise her. He insisted on incorporating both Korean and American traditions, hiring coordinators who specialized in multicultural ceremonies that honored both backgrounds equally. Her mother was consulted on every detail, from flower arrangements that complemented her wheelchair to menu selections that accommodated her new dietary restrictions. No expense was spared, but every choice emphasized family and love rather than display of wealth. The guest list was necessarily small, but deeply meaningful. Zara's cousins flew in from Detroit, wide-eyed at the luxury but quickly charmed by Jae-sung's genuine interest in their stories and his obvious devotion to their family. His associates attended with their wives and children, treating the occasion with the reverence due to their leader's happiness. The ceremony blended Korean customs with African-American traditions, creating something entirely unique but perfectly suited to their unusual love story. Mr. Kim served as officiant alongside the Korean minister, his mind clear and focused for the entire ceremony. When he pronounced them husband and wife in 2 languages, his voice carried the authority of a patriarch blessing the union that would secure his family's future happiness. The business changes had begun months earlier but accelerated after the wedding. Jae-sung systematically transferred operations from shadow enterprises to legitimate ventures, using his network and resources to build legal businesses that employed the same people who had once enforced territorial boundaries. The medical facility where Zara's mother received treatment became the flagship of a healthcare system that served families throughout Seoul, funded by shipping profits and managed with the efficiency that had once characterized less legal operations. Zara completed her nursing degree through an accelerated program designed for working professionals, studying in the compound's library while Mr. Kim napped and taking online courses that accommodated her caregiving schedule. Graduation day felt like a completion of the circle that had begun when she dropped out of school to work 3 jobs. Jae-sung sat in the front row beside her mother, applauding with the pride of someone who had watched her overcome impossible obstacles. The medical clinic they established together became her professional home, a place where her training and compassion could serve families who understood the complexities of loyalty and protection. She provided care for the extended Kim family network, treating injuries both accidental and occupational with discretion and skill. The work felt meaningful in ways her previous jobs never had, healing rather than simply surviving. The final threat elimination happened quietly, almost anticlimactically. The investigation into who had leaked information about family vulnerabilities led to a network of rivals and traitors that stretched across 3 countries. Jae-sung's response was comprehensive and permanent, conducted with the efficiency of someone who understood that incomplete solutions led to recurring problems. When the last loose end was tied off 6 months after their wedding, he came home and simply announced that all debts were settled. "No one will threaten this family again," he told Zara as they prepared for bed in their shared suite overlooking the gardens. "The people who tried to use you as a weapon have been permanently discouraged from similar attempts." Zara understood what that meant without needing details. Some aspects of his world would always require actions she chose not to examine closely. The important thing was that their safety was absolute, their future secure, their love protected by the kind of power that made enemies think twice before acting. A year after their wedding, Mr. Kim's 70th birthday party filled the compound with laughter and celebration. 3 generations of family gathered around tables laden with his favorite foods, sharing stories and making plans for the future. He was lucid and happy, delighted by the great-nephew who toddled between chairs and charmed by the great-nieces who brought him drawings and flowers from the garden. Zara sat beside her husband at the head table, watching the scene with deep satisfaction. Her mother was engaged in animated conversation with Jae-sung's elderly aunts, comparing grandchildren and sharing recipes with the easy intimacy of women who had found common ground despite vastly different backgrounds. Mr. Kim presided over the celebration with the dignity befitting the patriarch of a family that had survived threats and emerged stronger. When the formal dinner ended and guests moved to the garden for traditional music and dancing, Jae-sung found Zara standing at the edge of the festivities, observing the happiness she had helped create. "Regrets?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "None," she replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Not a single one. Even knowing what loving me cost you." Zara turned in his arms to face him, seeing in his dark eyes the same intensity that had frightened and attracted her in that hotel conference room so long ago. "Loving you saved me," she said simply. "Saved my mother, saved my future, gave me a family and a purpose and a life I never could have imagined." She thought of the exhausted woman who had worked 3 jobs and still faced impossible debt, who had stumbled into a dangerous world by accident and stayed by choice. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from another life entirely. The person she had become was stronger, more confident, protected and cherished in ways that made all the moral complexity worthwhile. The evening routine never changed. After guests departed and family members returned to their own homes, Zara helped Mr. Kim prepare for bed, while Jae-sung secured the compound and reviewed the day's business. They met in the family room for tea and quiet conversation, sharing the peaceful domesticity that had become their most treasured tradition. Tonight, Mr. Kim was particularly alert, asking about the party and expressing satisfaction with the way his family had grown. "You brought balance to our house," he told Zara as she administered his evening medications. "Before you came, there was too much sadness, too much worry. Now there is laughter and hope." "Thank you for accepting me," Zara replied, adjusting his blankets and checking that his water glass was within reach. "For letting me be part of your family." "Family chooses family," the old man said with the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to understand what truly mattered. "Blood is just the beginning. Love and loyalty are what make people belong to each other." When Jae-sung appeared in the doorway, his father smiled with deep contentment. "Take care of our daughter," he said in Korean, words Zara had learned to understand over months of language lessons. "Always," Jae-sung replied in the same language. "Always and forever." Later, as Seoul settled into the quiet hours before dawn, Zara lay beside her husband in their bedroom overlooking the gardens where they had first walked as cautious allies learning to trust each other. The compound was silent except for the gentle sounds of security patrols and night staff maintaining their vigilant watch over the family's peace. She had walked into a hotel conference room exhausted and desperate, carrying impossible burdens and facing impossible choices. She had walked out of that world entirely, transformed into someone who commanded respect and wielded influence, whose safety was guaranteed by the most dangerous man in Seoul, and whose happiness had become the cornerstone of a criminal empire gradually legitimizing itself through love. The woman who had cleaned hotel rooms and served coffee and waited tables for tips had evolved into the matriarch of a family that controlled shipping networks and medical facilities and political connections throughout Korea. The struggling nursing student had become the director of a healthcare system that served hundreds of families with discretion and excellence. Most importantly, the lonely daughter watching her mother die had become a wife and daughter and sister-in-law, surrounded by people who would die to protect her, married to a man who had eliminated every threat to her happiness with methodical precision. Jae-sung stirred beside her, his hand finding hers automatically even in sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to build something meaningful from the foundation of their unlikely love. The business required constant attention. His father needed continued care, her mother deserved ongoing involvement in their lives, and the extended family looked to them for leadership and protection. But tonight, Zara simply closed her eyes and listened to her husband's steady breathing, surrounded by security so complete that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. She was no longer running from debt or death or despair. She was standing at the center of an empire built on love and maintained through power, exactly where she belonged, exactly where she would remain for the rest of her life. The dangerous man's woman had found her forever home in the shadows, and the shadows had become her sanctuary.